Hi there everyone. Have any of y'all ever watched a movie that says it's based on a true story or something along those lines? Even indirectly, I'm sure you've seen it somewhere before. With how frequently we see this phrase being used, there's often one question not too far behind it. Just how based on a true story is it? Oftentimes the answer isn't a lot, much to the dismay from the audience, even to the extent to where we'd roll our eyes whenever we see that phrase in a movie's marketing sometimes. So I have to ask, what's really the point in using based on a true story or phrases like that, and how much does it affect the audience's experience? There's two movies I wanted to cover as I believe they may give an answer. Despite this phrase being commonly used for biopics or something like that, neither of the movies I'm gonna discuss are close to that genre. Why, that'd be too easy. In fact, we're gonna be talking about the Texas Chainsaw Massacre and Fargo, directed by Tobe Hooper and the Coen brothers respectively.
The Texas Chainsaw Massacre. After you stop screaming, you'll start talking about it.
A pioneer in the slasher genre of cinema, Tobe Hooper's 1974 grisly feature focused on a cannibalistic family preying upon unsuspecting teens during a road trip. Despite reviews at the time being mixed, since then, the movie has been recognized as groundbreaking in many ways. One of which extends to how the movie operates stylistically. The film has a dry, documentary-like execution which adds to the overall feel. You can practically sweat through the sticky, humid air in some of these shots.
As a Texan, this is an average Tuesday.
What sells the tone, though, might be with how the movie opens with an unsettling narration.
The film which you are about to see is an account of the tragedy which befell a group of 5 youths.
It's very creepy and effective. Especially back in the time of the film's debut, there weren't many movies with this sort of style, on top of which the type of stuff it was presenting.
Little cool shit.
Not to mention, this was pre-internet. At the time, it likely helped out a lot that the film's own poster claimed what happened is true.
One of them survives. What will be left?
Bateman, I like meat. Please change the subject.
What happened was true.
So was it? Was there really a Texas Chainsaw Massacre that occurred? No, not really. In reality, the movie was only partly inspired by the real-life crimes of Ed Gein, on top of other influences from varying sources. Mind you, Gein was a serial killer that resided not in Texas, but Wisconsin. The first of so many other inconsistencies that to blatantly say on the poster that what happened is true is a statement stretched so thin it could be the skin on Leatherface's living room lamp. However, the filmmakers themselves are aware of this disconnect. Believe it or not, that opening crawl in the movie does indicate this. Specifically, it describes the following movie as an account. It's not clearly stating, unlike the poster, that this specific story and what happened is true. It's that middle ground kind of language that's suggestive enough to the audience that somewhere, in some way, yeah, this type of thing did likely happen. This movie is just an account of that, so details and etc. have been changed. In fact, changed so much that it might as well have not been real. So to have the movie begin like that, it opens the door for the viewer's suspension of disbelief to be induced. If you're not aware of what that is, I describe it as whenever you're willing to excuse a lot of unrealistic logic in a story for the sake of just enjoying the story. To go even more simpler, I guess, for any Mystery Science Theater fans out there, it's essentially the mantra featured in the theme song.
Then repeat to yourself, it's just a show. I should really just relax.
Director Tobe Hooper himself states this maneuver was fully deliberate. During an interview off a DVD release, he even said that this type of cinematic white lie was a sort of response to the real-world climate of the day. How this movie states this fictional event as fact to the audience echoes the sentiment Hooper had of being lied to by the government about the things that were going on all over the world. As the film was produced during the early 70s, Hooper's dissatisfaction with the government does coincide with events that would have been common headlines at the time. It's easy to understand why, as the Watergate scandal and the Vietnam War both were fresh in the public consciousness. These were events that displayed a huge disconnection between what was being told to the American people and the reality of those situations.
Another interview corroborates this. Back in 2000, the Austin Chronicle had a chance to reminisce with Hooper on the movie. It was here that he remembered his influences at the time being all kind of politically, socially implanted. And then there was Watergate and running out of gas.
It's kind of meta or fourth wall breaking and one way for the movie to play the audience in that manner. Despite being a lie, the blatantly false claim here doesn't really ruin the movie or anything. The final result, true story or not, remains to be a pretty terrifying film by all means. The claim on the poster and the grim opening narration end up being a clever artistic touch by the filmmakers, as a means for us as the audience to buy into it more. At least in this particular case, the movie has more merit in doing so. There's dozens of interpretations of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre out there that make it clear that this isn't just plain misdirection for the sake of it, which is usually what we bemoan the usage of the phrase and idea of based on a true story for. Although who can blame the many other filmmakers that do use it disingenuously? For a tagline, it turns out it affects the audience perception surprisingly more than I previously thought.
One study I found from 2014 suggested that due to that perception, it may even affect what movie we decide to watch. The study posits that since the phrase highlights realism, us viewers that are looking to be emotionally engaged are more likely to choose that particular movie in the end.
Why is that? The article suggests that consumers tend to believe that true stories will have a greater emotional impact than fictional stories.
This is likely what that opening narration, effective as it is settling the general tone of the film, also is opening up our suspension of disbelief as the audience.
This idea of pursuing a true story granting us greater impact than fiction can even extend to genres too. Like, the entirety of true crime as a whole largely pulls its hook on the audience through the fact that it's real. If you haven't seen my video on true crime, then I'd recommend go checking it out since I do further go on specifically about that genre there. Suffice to say, it's easier for people to be drawn to your story if they think it's real, or even partly real. Which is why I also wanted to discuss the Coen brothers' fantastic 1996 movie, Fargo.
Oh, geez.
Fargo.
One of my most favorite films of all time, centering on how far a kidnapping and extortion scheme can go so wrong.
Whoa, Daddy.
Also opens with a message to the audience that's clear as day. In fact, it's really clear, flat out blatant. Looking closer, the very text claiming that this is a true story ended up being thicker than the rest of the message can be read as how tongue-in-cheek the Coens were about using it.
It's a step beyond what was seen in Texas Chainsaw's opening, as that at least had a middle ground saying it was an account. Here, they boldly and proudly claim, as with that movie's poster, that Fargo's plot is a true story. After the film was released, many theorized as to what were the true events that were depicted in the movie.
As most of the movie takes place in Minnesota, some of the state's natives theorized that a particular crime case there involving a husband hiring a hitman to murder his wife for money might have been the real-life influence.
Though what Shep told us didn't make a whole lot of sense. You want your own wife kidnapped.
Being such a distinctive parallel to the main plot of the movie, this theory built up some credibility. Alongside plot similarities, as it happens, the Coen brothers were living not too far away while the case was picking up notoriety in the press. For many, it's not hard to imagine that they were attuned to this and subsequently based Fargo off it years later. However, the Coens deny this.
No.
Through the years, there have been varying accounts as to what inspired the movie, but the Coens did address this point definitively. Remember that case I mentioned and how folks speculated on that influencing the movie? Yeah, it turns out in one article from 2015, the Coens straight up said they never heard of that.
I'm not sure that I agree with you 100% on your police work there, Lil.
They even admit in the same article that the story was completely made up, or as we like to say, the only true thing about it is that it's a story.
As to how Texas Chainsaw Massacre used the phrase, Fargo's more brazen usage of it acts further as an example for how this phrase affects our audience experience. In a review for Sleepers, a movie released later in the same year as Fargo, notable film critic Roger Ebert laments the usage of the true story claim also found in the movie's opening.
This is a true story about friendship that runs deeper than blood.
Throughout the review, it's clear that it affected his enjoyment of the film so much that the piece concludes with him declaring that I don't believe the story is true, not true to the facts, and not true to the morality it pretends to be about.
Contrast this with how he concludes his review for Fargo, to where despite the movies both open with similar claims, he ends this one saying films like Fargo are why I love the movies. Damn! Interestingly, compared to Sleepers, Ebert even acknowledges the half-truth element of Fargo's usage of the phrase right before that ending quote. To me, reading it, it just sounds like he kind of actually believed it.
Although I have no doubt that events something like this really did take place in Minnesota in 1987, they have elevated reality into a human comedy, into the kind of movie that makes us hug ourselves with the way it pulls off one improbable scene after another.
Hello?
So what was the difference here between the two? Well, Sleepers for one is based on a book that already had its veracity tested. Ebert, aware of this, also says of the movie that the claim is meant seriously, and that bothers me because it shows moral decisions being made which, in the real world, would have had real results. These two quotes indicate likelihood or probability being a large factor here. Fargo, despite how outlandish and stylistic the movie is, still manages to sell the story as real through the Coen's amazing writing and direction, having the audience believe the events as plausible. It's done so well that it doesn't even matter in the end whether or not it's fake. It's still really entertaining. Similar to the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Fargo pulled off what the Coens were going for.
Contrast that with Sleepers. For Ebert, much of what goes on in his review is him going over the apparent implausibility of, so many of the plot points. If the film fails to match the audience's inherent expectations from promising a true story, then in a way, the movie's fighting an uphill battle here.
Because, although I disagree with it on ideological grounds, and I also believe, by the way, it's not really based on a true story, because...
One study from 2017 I found seems to provide an answer as to why. It claims that when adding a label like "this is a true story," it does increase the perceived plausibility of that story. In turn, when the movie pulls through with this, it does enrich the audience experience. Although it's only if what the study refers to as typicality, or how likely it is to happen, is already low in the first place for the viewer. Fargo and Texas Chainsaw Massacre's plots both are extreme and out there, to say the least.
Is this a fucking joke here?
The scenarios presented, however unlikely to occur as they are in real life, are still presented with enough rules and groundwork to even be considered realistic at all. The true story claim done by these movies then is validated, though only by the viewer believing in it while watching. Whereas for the opposite, if the events depicted are more plausible, then the usage of the claim doesn't really do anything. Let's say you're already familiar with whatever topic a movie is supposed to depict. Then if it ends up either being factually wrong or logically inconsistent at some point, you'll be drawn out of the movie as a result. It's not a good experience at all.
In the aforementioned review for Sleepers, Ebert asks himself that all movies are in some way fiction, so what does it matter?
Evidently, adding that claim to your movie may not matter much if the movie itself just doesn't live up to it.
That 2017 study I previously brought up also touches on this, believing that adding it is, quote, no guarantee audiences will consider the entire story more plausible or like it more.
In the cases of our two examples, I'd say removing the insinuation of the stories being true still wouldn't impede on the overall quality of either movies. Both were examples to where the usage of the claim was less a pure marketing strategy and instead, surprisingly, an artistic touch to either reflect on politics at the time or to further induce the audience suspension of disbelief for the stories the filmmakers wanted to tell.
The Coens themselves were aware of this enough to comment on it directly. Joel Coen specifically was quoted in an MTV News article back in 2005, "If an audience believes that something's based on a real event, it gives you permission to do things they might otherwise not accept."
Regardless of the inclusion, however, these were just plain good movies. Even though they were presented as a true story, it just helped the audience experience even further. It scratches that itch of an inherent curiosity, a sense of shock to behold to see how this true story wraps up.
You should see the other guy.
That visceral emotional experience while watching the movie is valuable. In my opinion, it's that experience that makes it not matter in the end if whether or not what we saw was real anyway. Gosh darn it, it was fun to watch, and I'll be damned if it's a crime to enjoy a good movie. Even if it lies to you sometimes. What do you guys think? What's another example of a movie that uses based on a true story or something similar that you can recall? Let me know in the comments down below and subscribe for more videos to come. There's some other videos around here that I know you'll like, so stick around and see what you want to watch next. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys next time as well.